Chapter 6 is poverty and economic inequality. And poverty is the lack of resources that's necessary for material well-being, such as food, water, housing, land, health care. There are two different types of poverty that you need to be familiar with, and that is absolute poverty and relative poverty. Absolute poverty is a lack of resources that leads to hunger and physical deprivation. In other words, it is life-threatening. And relative poverty is a deficiency in material and economic resources compared with some other population. Relative poverty is found everywhere. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you're in a rich country or in a poor country. Okay, this is the kind that is found here in the United States. To capture the multi-dimensional nature of poverty, the multi-dimensional poverty index is based on health, education, and living standards. The index does take into account the total number of deprived people and the intensity of their deprivation. 1/3 of the world's population does live in multi-dimensional poverty, and Sweden has the lowest level of human poverty. In 1964, the Social Security Administration devised a poverty index based on data that indicated families spent about 1/3 of their income on food. The official poverty level was set by multiplying food costs by 3. Since then, the poverty level has been updated annually for inflation, but otherwise it's remained unchanged. Poverty thresholds vary by the number of adults and children in the family and by the age of the family head of household. The United States has the greatest degree of income inequality and the highest rate of poverty of any industrialized nation. From a structural functionalist perspective, poverty results from institutional breakdown, economic institutions that fail to provide sufficient jobs and pay, educational institutions that fail to provide adequate education in the low-income school districts, family institutions that do not provide two parents, government institutions that do not provide sufficient public support. Institutional breakdowns does create a culture of poverty whereby people living in persistent poverty, known as the underclass, they tend to develop norms, values, beliefs, and self-concepts that contribute to their own plight. Karl Marx, with the conflict perspective, proposed that economic inequality results from the domination of the bourgeoisie, which is owners of the means of production, over the proletariat, which is the workers. And of course, the bourgeoisie accumulate wealth as they profit from the labor of the proletariat who earn the low wages. There's one concept that you do need to know, and that is welfare. Welfare is laws and policies that favor the rich. In other words, it's tax breaks for the wealthy. In 2009, 43.6 million of Americans, which is 14.3% of the population, live below the poverty line. More than half of Americans aged 20 to 75 will spend at least 1 year in poverty, and 1 in 3 will experience a full year of extreme poverty at some point in his or her adult life. Children are more likely than adults to live in poverty. Compared with other industrialized nations, the United States has the highest child poverty rate. Women are more likely than men to live in poverty. This is known as a feminization of poverty. Education is one of the best insurance policies for protecting an individual against living in poverty. Certainly the higher the level, a person's level of education, the less likely that person is to be poor. Poverty is more prevalent among female-headed single-parent households than any other family structure. Children in same-sex couple families are twice as likely to be poor as children of married heterosexual couples. Poverty rates are higher among blacks, Hispanics, Native American, Alaska Natives, and non-Hispanic whites. Some of the causes of poverty among minorities include past and present discrimination, loss of manufacturing jobs from the inner cities, movement of whites and middle-class blacks out of the inner city and the resulting concentration of poverty in predominantly minority inner city neighborhoods, and higher proportion of female-headed households. Many United States poor are classified as working poor, individuals who spend at least 27 weeks per year in the labor force, but those income falls below the poverty line. In developing countries, absolute poverty is associated with hunger and malnutrition, high rates of maternal and infant deaths, indoor air pollution, unsafe water and sanitation. In 2010, it was estimated that 925 million people globally were undernourished. The poor are more vulnerable to devastation from natural disasters. Certainly they have few to no resources to help them avoid or cope with natural disasters. Education or economic inequality is linked to lower average levels of educational attainment. Family income is a stronger predictor of ability and achievement than are measures for parental schooling or family structure. Certainly, some of the stresses associated with low income contribute to substance abuse, domestic violence, child abuse, neglect, divorce, and questionable parenting practices. There's a list here. Certainly couples with incomes less than $25,000 are more likely to divorce. Child neglect is more likely to be found with poor parents. Poor parents are more likely to use harsh physical disciplinary techniques, and poor adolescent teenagers are at higher risk for pregnancy. Housing problems. The poor are more likely to live in substandard housing. Certainly many live without heating, air conditioning, sewers, septic tanks. We can go on and on with those. Poor are more likely than non-poor to live in high crime neighborhoods. Homelessness over the course of lifetime, an estimated 9 to 15% of the United States population does become homeless. The housing crisis in recent years has caused financial ruin for millions of United States citizens and exacerbated poverty worldwide. Intergenerational poverty. This is poverty that is transmitted from one generation to the next. Nearly half of United States children born to low-income parents become low-income adults. Poverty is often the root cause of conflict and war within and between countries. Poor countries are more likely to engage in civil war, and countries that experience civil war tend to become and or remain poor. Now, there's many strategies for alleviating poverty. Some government public assistance and welfare programs in the United States. One is means-tested programs. These are programs that have eligibility requirements based on income. We have supplemental security income. It provides income to poor people who are 65 or older, blind, or disabled. We have temporary assistance to needy families, which is called TANF. The largest food assistance program in the United States is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's called SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. And then it's followed by school meals and the Special Supplemental Food Program for Women, Infants, and Children, which is WIC, W-I-C. Looking at the minimum wage increase and the living wage laws, in 2009, the federal minimum wage was increased to $7.25 an hour. And as of 2011, there were 17 states and Washington, D.C. that mandated a higher minimum wage. Living wage laws are used by many cities and counties throughout the United States that require state or municipal contractors or recipients of public subsidies or tax breaks, or in some cases, all businesses to pay their employees wages significantly above the minimum wage, which enables families to live above the poverty line. Research has found that businesses that pay their employees a living wage have lower worker turnover and absenteeism, reduced training costs, higher morale, and higher productivity in a stronger consumer market.